They were choices that went too far. 6 ordinary moments, each starting as harmless fun but ending in tragedy. One reckless decision was enough to cost a life. These are the final moments of people who died in extremely dumb ways. It was July 4th, 2016, in a small Texas town where families were setting up folding chairs and picnic blankets on a neighborhood street. Independence Day was always celebrated there with food, music, and fireworks. Children ran around holding sparklers, and neighbors carried coolers filled with soda and beer. As the sun went down, the smell of barbecue lingered in the warm summer air, and the first fireworks began to pop in the distance. Among the crowd was 24-year-old Rachel Cooper. She worked as a cashier at the local grocery store and was known in her community for being outgoing. Friends often described her as the one who could make anyone laugh, and she enjoyed being at the center of attention when groups gathered. That night, Rachel came with several cousins to enjoy the festival-like atmosphere. They joined dozens of others in a wide-open yard near the street, where fireworks were stacked and ready for lighting. As the evening went on, people lit small fireworks before the main display. Firecrackers popped on the pavement, and bottle rockets went off nearby. Rachel had been drinking with her cousins, who brought a cooler of beer to the gathering. Witnesses later recalled that she was laughing loudly, moving from group to group, and encouraging people to light more fireworks. At one point, she pulled out a mortar-style aerial firework, designed to launch from a tube. It was meant to be placed on the ground before lighting, but Rachel decided to hold it in her hand. According to witnesses, she had seen similar stunts on social media and thought it would look like a sparkler. Her cousins immediately told her not to do it, warning that it was dangerous. One of them even tried to take it away, but Rachel pulled back and insisted she could handle it. Friends began recording, expecting another lighthearted stunt. Rachel lit the fuse, holding the device above her head. The crowd began shouting for her to put it down, but she laughed and waved her arm as the sparks hissed near the top. Witnesses later told investigators that she seemed more focused on putting on a show than on the warnings shouted around her. Within seconds, the fuse burned too low. Instead of launching into the air as designed, the firework exploded in her hand, sending shrapnel and flames into her chest and knocking her backward onto the ground. People nearby said the sound was louder than any firecracker they had heard that night, followed by screams from the crowd. Those standing closest rushed to her side. A neighbor grabbed a towel from a picnic basket, while others yelled for someone to call 911. Her cousins were crying out her name, trying to figure out what had happened. Eyewitnesses recalled seeing smoke and sparks still rising from the firework fragments on the ground. Paramedics were dispatched immediately after the call came in. They arrived within minutes, but Rachel's injuries were severe. She had lost a large amount of blood, and the blast caused severe trauma to her chest and arm, leaving burns, deep lacerations, and internal injuries. Despite efforts to stabilize her, she was pronounced dead before reaching the hospital. Neighbors later told reporters that the once lively street had gone silent, except for sirens and quiet sobs from those who had witnessed the scene. The following week, Rachel's funeral was held at a small church in town. Family members, co-workers, and friends filled the pews. Her parents asked for privacy, and the service remained quiet, without media coverage. In the days after, local authorities issued statements reminding residents of firework safety. They emphasized that fireworks should always be placed on the ground before lighting, never held in the hand, and especially not used while drinking. Police also confirmed that her death was classified as an accident caused by misuse of fireworks. Rachel's story became a cautionary tale in her community. People who had been at the gathering admitted that the memory of the explosion stayed with them long after the holiday ended. The 4th of July celebration, once a source of joy, was remembered that year for the moment when a playful stunt turned deadly in front of dozens of witnesses. It was May 12, 2016. And friends hiked a Louisiana wildlife area near Baton Rouge known for swampy trails and unstable marshes. Despite posted warnings to stay on marked paths, they carried picnic supplies for an afternoon outdoors. Among them was 31-year-old Thomas Cox, a warehouse worker from Baton Rouge. Thomas had a reputation among his friends for taking risks, whether it was climbing fences or ignoring posted rules. He wasn't reckless in a dangerous way most of the time, but he often treated warnings as suggestions. On this trip, he carried a small backpack and joked often as the group made their way along the dirt path. The trail curved near a wide, swampy stretch of land where the ground looked firm but was dotted with standing water. Wooden barriers and warning signs marked the edge, clearly stating "Do not cross, unstable ground." The group slowed as they reached the area, and someone pointed out that the mud pits in the marsh could be dangerous. Thomas told his friends it looked like a shortcut. He stepped over the wooden barrier, ignoring their calls for him to come back. He waved his arm and laughed, saying he could make it across faster than the rest of them. Witnesses later recalled that he walked only a few feet before his shoes sank into the mud. At first, it looked shallow, and he tried to pull his legs free. Within seconds, he was stuck past his knees. Thomas shifted his weight to one side, trying to move forward, but the mud tightened around him. Each time he pulled one leg up, the other sank deeper. Friends on the trail shouted for him to stop moving and to wait for help, but he kept struggling. In less than a minute, the suction of the mud had pulled him up to his waist. One witness later described hearing a heavy sloshing sound as the ground sucked him lower. The group rushed to find something to pull him out. One man broke off a tree branch, while another grabbed a cooler handle and tried to extend it toward Thomas. Before they could reach him, Thomas lost his balance and fell forward. With his lower body locked in place by suction, his face pressed into the wet mud, and he couldn't push himself up to breathe. Panic spread immediately. One friend tried to run closer but sank into the soft edge himself, forcing him to scramble back before he got stuck too. Others yelled for Thomas to hold still, though it was clear he was already trapped. Cell phones came out and 911 calls were made with frantic directions to the rescue crews. By the time emergency services arrived, the only sign of Thomas was a patch of disturbed mud near the barrier. Firefighters and wildlife officers laid wooden boards across the marsh to spread their weight and used long ropes and poles to search. They soon located him face down, pinned just beneath the surface by tightly packed mud. It took almost 30 minutes of careful digging to free him. The following week, Thomas's funeral was held in Baton Rouge. Family, co-workers, and friends filled the small chapel. The service was quiet, with his parents asking for privacy. Those who attended spoke of how quickly a lighthearted moment outdoors had turned tragic. In the days that followed, local authorities reinforced barriers along the swampy section of the wildlife area. More warning signs were added, this time with bright colors and clear messages about unstable ground and mud pits. Officials used the incident as a reminder to all visitors: stay on the marked paths, because even familiar-looking ground in Louisiana's marshes can become a deadly trap. It was November 15, 2015, in Brooklyn, New York. College students filled the streets, moving between apartments, stores, and subway stops. In one mid-rise apartment building, a group of young people gathered for a birthday party. The night was typical for the city. Music from nearby bars, traffic on the avenues, and people crowding sidewalks. Inside the building lobby, the group of friends laughed, talked loudly, and drank from red plastic cups they had carried downstairs. Among them was 19-year-old Amanda Lewis, a college freshman who had recently moved to the city for school. She was new to Brooklyn, but had already made several close friends through her dorm and classes. That night, she wore a small crossbody purse and joined others in telling stories, taking photos, and joking around as the party continued. At some point, one of the students pointed at the elevator and suggested they try to beat the doors. It was a popular prank to rush toward an elevator as the doors were closing, trying to slip inside before they shut completely. Some laughed and brushed it off, but Amanda stepped forward, eager to join the game. According to witnesses, she smiled and prepared to run as the elevator doors began to close again. As Amanda sprinted toward the elevator, the timing was off. Her purse strap got caught in the gap when the doors shut. The old elevator did not sense the strap was there. This made the strap pull her forward toward the doors. She tried to get away, but the elevator started to go up too fast. In just a few seconds, she became stuck between the elevator and the door frame. She could not break free from this position. Her friends panicked and began slamming the call buttons, trying to force the doors open. One shouted for someone to get building staff while others screamed for the elevator to stop. But the elevator cab kept moving upward, pulling her with it. The crowd in the lobby was frozen, realizing the situation was out of control. Security guards and staff responded within minutes, rushing to shut off power to the elevator system. By then, Amanda was critically injured. Witnesses said the lobby had fallen into silence except for the sound of people crying and emergency radios crackling as first responders rushed in. Paramedics arrived quickly and worked to free her, but she was unresponsive. She was placed on a stretcher and rushed toward an ambulance waiting outside. Despite efforts during transport, Amanda was pronounced dead on the way to the hospital. The accident was later confirmed by investigators as a crushing injury caused by being pinned between the elevator and the frame. The elevator was later found to be an older model, with sensors that did not detect the strap in time. The following week, Amanda's funeral was held in her hometown. Friends, classmates, and relatives filled the small chapel where the service took place. Students from her college traveled to attend, shocked at how quickly a night of celebration had turned into tragedy. In the days that followed, the apartment building management reviewed its elevator system and procedures. They placed new warning signs inside and outside of the elevators, reminding tenants not to force the doors or play games around the machinery. Officials also reminded the public that elevators are not toys, and misusing them can lead to severe injuries or even death. For those who had been in the lobby that night, the memory was hard to forget. The loud chatter, the music, and the playful dares ended with silence as they witnessed an accident that could have been avoided. What began as a harmless joke in the middle of a party turned into a fatal mistake in front of dozens of witnesses. It was June 12, 2018, in Tampa, Florida. The summer evenings were hot, and many neighborhoods were already preparing for fireworks shows ahead of Independence Day. Families set up folding chairs and coolers in their driveways, while kids ran around the yards with sparklers. Some neighbors were outside grilling as the evening went on. On one block, 34-year-old Chris Dalton decided to watch the show from his own home. Chris worked as a handyman, taking on jobs like fixing roofs, repairing gutters, and patching drywall. Neighbors knew him as the man who always had tools in his truck. That Saturday evening, instead of joining the families on the street, Chris came up with his own plan. He wanted the best view of the fireworks without having to leave his property. Carrying a folding lawn chair in one hand and a cold beer in the other, Chris climbed a ladder to the top of his house. The roof was sloped and covered with asphalt shingles, not meant for sitting or walking, but he set up his chair anyway. His wife, watching from the yard, warned him it wasn't a good idea. He brushed it off and settled himself near the peak of the roof, looking out over the street below. From the ground, neighbors spotted him on the roof and pointed. Some shook their heads, while others laughed nervously at the sight. It wasn't common to see someone sitting in a chair on top of their house, but Chris seemed relaxed as he leaned back, taking a sip of his beer while waiting for the fireworks to start. As minutes passed, Chris shifted his chair a little closer to the edge, trying to get a better angle of the street and horizon. Neighbors later reported that he adjusted his position several times, moving the legs of the chair across the shingles. At one point, he leaned back with one hand holding the beer can. The chair wobbled slightly, and then, in an instant, the front leg slipped. The chair skidded down the slope of the roof, and Chris fell with it. Witnesses recalled hearing the scraping sound of metal legs against shingles, followed by a heavy thud. He fell 2 stories, landing on the concrete driveway below. His wife screamed and ran toward him, shouting for help. Several neighbors rushed across their lawns toward the driveway. One dialed 911 immediately, while another knelt beside him, checking for signs of movement. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the street as EMTs arrived. Paramedics began CPR in the driveway, while neighbors stood nearby in shock. Efforts continued as they loaded Chris into the ambulance and transported him to the nearest hospital. Despite their attempts, doctors later confirmed Chris had died from severe head and internal injuries caused by the fall. The following week, Chris's funeral was held in Tampa. Family, neighbors, and old co-workers gathered for the service. Friends described him as an easygoing man who was always ready to lend a hand with repairs or house projects. The service remained small and quiet, attended mostly by those who knew him personally. In the days that followed, local fire officials released a public reminder about roof safety. They warned residents never to use rooftops as seating areas, stressing that roofs are not designed to hold chairs or accommodate gatherings. Officials also reminded the public that even experienced handymen and construction workers are at risk when they take unnecessary chances. Neighbors on Chris's street remembered the night not for the fireworks, but for the sound of sirens and the sudden silence that followed the fall. What began as a lighthearted idea for a better view turned into a tragedy witnessed by an entire block. It was February 2016 in Wichita, Kansas. The air was cold, and the sun had already set when drivers began pulling into gas stations and car washes around the city. Automated car wash stations were common in the area, especially during the winter months when salt and grime from the roads built up quickly on vehicles. Drivers could pay at a machine, pull forward onto the conveyor, and wait inside their cars as large brushes, rollers, and dryers cleaned the vehicle. That evening, 42-year-old Brian Phillips stopped at one of these stations after finishing his shift. Brian worked as a mechanic and often spent long hours in repair shops. He was known by coworkers for his habit of tinkering with machines and joking that he could fix anything if it broke. Driving home, he decided to wash the dust and oil off his truck before parking it for the night. He drove into the small car wash bay and paid at the machine. Later, people who looked into what happened said the payment machine got stuck. Instead of staying in his truck, Brian got out to see what was wrong. His truck had already moved forward onto the moving belt, and the wash had started. Signs on the walls told customers to stay in their cars during the wash, but Brian moved toward the control panel anyway. Right then, the big brushes started to spin. The large spinning brushes moved forward and hit Brian, making him lose his balance. He fell down onto the moving belt, which pulled his leg underneath, while the heavy brushes hit his body. The machine did not stop working. People at a gas station nearby could see through the open sides of the car wash bay. They later told police they saw him fighting against the machine parts. The moving belt pulled him forward, while the heavy brushes pushed his chest and shoulders into the machine parts. The strong force hurt him badly inside his body and made it so he could not breathe. When the machine finally stopped, Brian was not moving or responding. A driver waiting in line behind him jumped out of his car and ran toward the emergency stop button mounted on the wall of the bay. He slammed it, but the system took several seconds to wind down, far slower than modern standards. By the time the brushes stopped spinning, Brian was unresponsive. Paramedics were dispatched within minutes of the 911 call. Emergency crews arrived and used tools to pry apart parts of the conveyor system, pulling Brian free after several minutes. Attempts to revive him at the scene were unsuccessful. He was pronounced dead before he could be transported. Officials later confirmed he had suffered severe crushing injuries from being caught in the moving equipment. News of the accident spread quickly through the neighborhood. As the car wash was located near a busy road lined with gas stations, small stores, and diners, people who had been inside the nearby businesses described hearing sirens and seeing the bay surrounded by police cars and fire engines. Brian's funeral was held in Wichita later that week. Family, friends, and co-workers attended, with several of his shop colleagues remembering his long-running joke that he could fix anything. They spoke about his years of work as a mechanic and how the accident seemed especially tragic given his constant interest in machines. In the days after, authorities inspected the car wash facility. Investigators found that the emergency stop system did not shut down the machinery as quickly as it should have. The facility was cited for poor safety sensors and outdated equipment. Local news outlets reported that the owners were required to upgrade the system and post clearer warnings to customers. The accident became a cautionary story in the area. Officials reminded the public that car washes are designed to run automatically and are unsafe for anyone who steps out of a vehicle while they are operating. For those who had witnessed the event from the gas station and the waiting line, the image of a man caught in the very machines he thought he could handle remained a lasting memory. It was October 21st, 2015, in Los Angeles, California. The university dorms were busy that evening, with students studying, moving between rooms, and gathering in the common areas. The vending machines located in the first-floor lounge were often crowded late at night, especially during midterms, when many students stayed awake into the early morning hours. The machines carried snacks, candy, and bottled drinks, and they became the main stop for anyone who had missed the dining hall hours. Among those living in the dorm was 20-year-old Tristan Watson, a college sophomore. Tristan was known by classmates for pulling frequent all-nighters. He often relied on caffeine and vending machine snacks to keep himself going when the library and dining halls were closed. That night, after missing dinner, he walked downstairs with a few friends to grab a drink before returning to his room to study. Witnesses said he inserted his money into the machine and selected a bottle of soda. The bottle dropped partway but became stuck behind the glass instead of landing in the tray. Students nearby recalled him shaking his head in frustration. Instead of letting it go or choosing another drink, he decided to try to free the bottle himself. At first, he slapped the front of the machine with his hand. When that didn't work, he began rocking the unit back and forth. On the front of the vending machine was a warning label telling users not to shake or tip it, as the machine could fall and cause injury. But Tristan ignored the notice, convinced he could dislodge the soda with enough force. His roommates later said he pushed the machine back and forth several times. Each time he pushed, the machine leaned out more. On his last push, the heavy machine tilted too far forward. In just a few seconds, the 800-pound vending machine fell over. It pinned his chest and head against the wall/floor corner. The loud crash sound filled the dorm room, and students nearby ran toward him. Several people tried to lift the machine up, but it weighed almost 800 pounds when it was full of drinks and snacks. This made it too heavy for just 1 or 2 people to move. They called out for help as more students ran into the room. Working together, they pushed against the metal sides of the machine, but the way it had fallen and how much it weighed made it very hard to move. Someone called 911 while other students tried to hold the machine up to take some weight off Tristan's body. Paramedics arrived within minutes of the call. Emergency crews used equipment to pull the vending machine upright and drag it away. The impact had caused crushing injuries to his chest and head, leaving him unresponsive. Efforts to revive him were made on the scene, but he showed no signs of life. He was officially pronounced dead before leaving the dorm. The accident was reported across campus, leaving many in shock that something so ordinary could turn deadly. University staff sealed off the lounge area for inspection, while police and campus security interviewed the students who had been present. The vending machine was later removed, and officials reminded students that warnings printed on the front of machines were there for a reason. In the weeks that followed, maintenance crews inspected all campus vending machines, securing them with bolts to the walls and floors to prevent future tip-overs. Tristan's funeral was held later that week in California. Family members, classmates, and professors attended, remembering his dedication to schoolwork and his reputation for staying up late to finish assignments. The service was quiet, without much attention beyond those who knew him personally. In the aftermath, university officials placed stronger warning labels on all vending machines across campus. Safety reminders were emailed to students, warning them never to shake or rock heavy equipment. The incident was also noted in local news outlets as a reminder of how quickly routine actions can turn tragic. For those who had been in the lounge that night, the memory lingered. What began as a simple trip for a soda ended in chaos, with dozens of students watching paramedics wheel out one of their classmates. It was a fatal accident that many later admitted could have been prevented if the warning sign had been taken seriously. Thanks for tuning in. If you're ready for more, the next story is waiting on the end screen, another last moment video.